I thought I had lost everything when my grandfather passed away. He was the one person who always believed in me, always told me I deserved better than how my family treated me. When the will revealed that Grandpa left me his beloved house, the one he built with his own hands, it felt like a final gesture of love, a promise that I wasn't forgotten. But before I could even set foot inside, my own family betrayed me. My uncle, my cousins, even my own parents, without asking me, without caring, they sold the house. Just like that. As if my inheritance, my memories, my connection to Grandpa meant nothing. They thought it was over. They thought I would cry, beg, and vanish quietly. But what they didn't know was that Grandpa had always been one step ahead. Buried in his careful planning was a secret backup plan, one that would flip their betrayal on its head and give me the justice I deserved. And when I discovered it, I laughed through my tears, because Grandpa's love defeated their greed. My name is Elena, and if there was one person in this world who truly understood me, it was my grandfather. He wasn't just family, he was my safe place, my mentor, my best friend. When my parents were too busy criticizing me, and my cousins found joy in mocking me, Grandpa was the one who reminded me I was worth something. I still remember how his wrinkled hands would close over mine as he'd say, "Don't let them break you, Elena. One day you'll see what I've left for. You. You'll know how much you mean to me." After he passed away, my world felt hollow. The man who always defended me was gone, and all that was left was a sea of cold, familiar faces who had always made me feel like I didn't belong. Yet even through the grief, I clung to his words. He had promised me I'd never be forgotten. So when the lawyer called to gather us all for the reading of the will, my heart pounded. A part of me dreaded seeing my family's smug expressions. But another part whispered that maybe, just maybe, Grandpa had left me something more than memories. As I drove to his old brick house for the meeting, the same house where I had spent countless summers at his side, I could almost hear his voice urging me to stay strong. I walked into the living room, and instantly the air shifted. My cousins, Evelyn and Marcus, smirked as if they had already won. My parents barely looked at me. The air was tense, sharp with greed. And yet, my heart held onto Grandpa's promise. Whatever was about to be read, I prayed it would finally prove that I was not invisible. The room went silent as the lawyer, a solemn man with thin glasses and a stack of papers, cleared his throat. Every eye in the room darted toward him, but I could feel the heat of my relative's stares burning into me. I clasped my hands together, trying to keep them from shaking. He began with small items, sentimental things, donations to charity, tokens of appreciation. My cousins exchanged impatient glances. I could feel their tension building, like hounds waiting for a bone. Then the lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, and read the words that would change everything. To my granddaughter, Elena, I leave my house, our family home. May it always remind her that she was never alone and that she is my true heir. The words echoed in my mind like a melody I had longed to hear. My heart leapt. He had chosen me. Grandpa had seen me, valued me, and left me the one thing money could never truly measure. His house, the place where his love still lived. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's mouth twisted into a scowl. Marcus's eyes flared with shock, and my parents stiffened in their chairs. No one clapped, no one smiled. It was as though I had just stolen something from them. Though it was never theirs to claim, for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of pride. Grandpa had honored his promise, but the venom in the air told me this was only the beginning of a war I hadn't asked for. The lawyer's voice still hung in the air when the whispers began. It wasn't even whispers, really, more like hisses of disbelief that sliced through the silence. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, folding her manicured hands across her lap, her smile sharp as a knife. "Well," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "isn't that precious? Grandpa left the house to Elena, of all people." Marcus chuckled, darkly. Maybe he thought she'd finally do something useful for once. Fixing up a house might keep her busy instead of, well, failing at everything else. I felt the sting of his words, but I kept my chin lifted. For years I'd been their target, the quiet girl they loved to mock. But this time, their cruelty. only made Grandpa's gift mean more. My parents, however, didn't even bother with sarcasm. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. My mother shook her head, muttering under her breath about favoritism and unfairness. The lawyer, uncomfortable with the brewing storm, quickly closed his folder and excused himself. As his footsteps faded down the hall, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The moment the door shut, the masks came off. "You don't deserve that house," my father snapped. "Your cousins worked harder for this family than you ever did." I wanted to scream. Worked harder? Grandpa had spent every summer with me, teaching me, guiding me, trusting me. My cousins barely showed up, too busy with their own selfish lives. But I stayed quiet. For now, the resentment in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on. I knew then that Grandpa's gift wasn't just an inheritance, it was a declaration, a choice that proved he saw the truth, and my family hated me for it. That night, after the storm of accusations, I slipped away to the house that was now mine. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and violet streaks as I stood before the worn front porch. My heart ached, but in that ache was a strange kind of joy. The old house smelled like wood and dust, but to me, it smelled like safety. Memories came rushing back, summers in the garden with Grandpa, evenings by the fireplace, his laughter echoing down the halls. He had left me more than property. He had left me the heart of our family. I walked through each room, running my fingers along the peeling wallpaper, imagining how I would restore it. New paint, polished floors, maybe even turning the attic into a library just like Grandpa had dreamed. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about preserving love, legacy, and the only place that had ever felt like home. Standing in the backyard, I looked up at the ancient oak tree, its branches stretching wide as if trying to protect me. Beneath its roots, I swore I could almost hear Grandpa whisper, "This is yours, Elena. Don't let them take it away." I promised him then I would fight to keep it. No matter what, the promise was shattered just days later. I had gone back to the house, armed with notebooks full of renovation plans and a heart full of determination. But as I walked up the driveway, something was different. A strange car was parked out front, and the sound of unfamiliar voices drifted through the open door. Confused, I hurried inside, only to find strangers walking through the halls. A man with a clipboard was pointing at the ceiling, discussing repairs with a young couple. My stomach dropped. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my house?" I demanded. The man looked at me like I was the intruder. "This property was recently sold. We're the new owners." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Sold? My mind spun as I rushed to my parents' house, heart pounding like a drum. When I burst through the door, they didn't even look surprised. My father sat calmly with a cup of coffee. "We had to sell it," he said flatly. "It was too much responsibility for you. We split the money among the family. It was for the best." I stared at him, my hands trembling, my throat tight with rage and disbelief. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had spit on Grandpa's final wish, and they hadn't even bothered to ask me. The weight of betrayal crushed me like a stone. I locked myself in my small apartment that night, sobbing until my chest ached. Everything Grandpa had promised, everything I had dreamed of, had been ripped away by the very people who were supposed to be my family. I felt erased, like my existence. Didn't matter. Grandpa's house wasn't just wood and brick. It was proof that I belonged, that someone believed in me. And now, that proof was gone. Stolen, sold off like a meaningless object. Every cruel word my cousins had ever thrown at me echoed louder than ever. Useless, unworthy, delusional. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing more than the unwanted shadow of the family. I curled up on the floor, clutching one of Grandpa's old photographs, my tears blurring his face. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," I whispered. "I couldn't protect it. I couldn't protect you." But somewhere deep in my despair, a spark flickered. Grandpa wouldn't have left me defenseless. He had always been careful, always one step ahead. And though I didn't know it yet, his love had left me a secret weapon, one that would turn my collapse into the beginning of their downfall. The days after the sale were suffocating. My phone buzzed with group messages from my family, plans for vacations, dinners, and shopping sprees they were funding with their share of the money. Not once did anyone call me. Not once did anyone ask how I was coping. When I finally confronted my parents in their kitchen, the silence was worse than anger. My mother stirred her tea calmly, as though I was a guest, not her daughter. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. "You're overreacting," he finally muttered. "It was just a house." "Just a house?" My voice cracked as I reminded them it was Grandpa's dying wish, his legacy. My mother set down her spoon, her eyes flat and unyielding. "Elena, stop being dramatic. We did what was best for the family. You should be thanking us." The words felt like daggers. Best for the family? Since when did family not include me? That night, I sat in my car outside their house, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The silence between us wasn't just cold, it was final. For the first time in my life, I realized I was truly alone in this family. Evelyn and Marcus didn't bother with silence, they thrived on cruelty. At a cousin's birthday party a week later, Evelyn clinked her champagne glass and said loudly, "To Grandpa's house! Finally put to good use. Shame Elena couldn't handle the responsibility." The room erupted in laughter. My face burned, but I stayed seated. Marcus leaned across the table, smirking. "Don't take it personally, cousin. Some people are meant to inherit legacies. Others, well, some are just meant to watch." Their words stung, but what cut deepest was the glee in their eyes. They weren't just mocking me, they were celebrating my erasure. I excused myself to the bathroom, gripping the sink and staring into the mirror. My reflection looked hollow, defeated. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them back. Grandpa had always told me, they laugh because they fear what you could become. For the first time, I wondered if he'd known this day would come. When I pressed my parents again about the sale, hoping for even a shred of remorse, all I got was cold justification. My father sat back in his chair, arms crossed. "Elena, you don't understand responsibility. That house needed money, upkeep, taxes. Do you think you could handle that?" My mother added with a sigh, "You're single, childless, drifting from job to job. What good is a house to you? Your cousins have families to support. They needed it more." Her words hit like a hammer. Single, childless, drifting, as if my worth could only be measured by marriage, children, or financial stability. I wanted to scream that the house wasn't about money, it was about love, memory, belonging. But their faces were unmoved, carved in stone. In their eyes, I was selfish for even caring. I left their house that night with a hollow chest and a new truth burning inside me. They would never see me as worthy. In my grief, I turned to the only place I could still find solace, my memories of Grandpa. I pulled out his old journals, the ones filled with sketches, notes, and quotes he loved. His handwriting brought him back to life in a way that almost hurt. One entry stood out, "The ones you love may betray you. Plan for it. Protect what matters most." I remembered how, on summer evenings, he would sit with me under the oak tree and talk about resilience. Life isn't about what they take from you, Elena. It's about what they can't take. Your spirit, your truth, your fight. The more I read, the more I realized Grandpa had always known the family's greed. He'd seen their hunger for wealth and their disdain for me. And in his quiet way, he had tried to prepare me. Those words sparked something I thought I had lost. Hope. As I reread the journals, patterns emerged, phrases that suddenly seemed less like ramblings and more like breadcrumbs. "Don't forget to look beneath the roots. What's hidden will outlast what's stolen." I thought back to conversations I'd brushed off. Times Grandpa had smiled mysteriously when talking about the house. Times he'd said, "If they ever try to take it, remember, it's not the only gift I've left." My heart raced as the puzzle pieces slid into place. Grandpa hadn't been sentimental. He had been deliberate. He had known they would betray me. And he had left me clues. How could I have missed it before? Maybe grief had blinded me. Maybe I hadn't wanted to believe my family capable of this. But now, with fresh eyes, I saw it clearly. Grandpa had left me a backup plan. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words, "beneath the roots," circled in my mind like an echo. I pictured the oak tree in the backyard, its roots sprawling deep, into the earth. My heart pounded with suspicion. Could Grandpa have hidden something? A letter, a deed, maybe even another will? It sounded impossible, like a fairy tale, but then again, hadn't he always been one step ahead? I tossed and turned, my mind ablaze with questions. Finally, just before dawn, I made a decision. I would go back to the house, my house, and search. If there was a secret, I would find it. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a flicker of control, a flicker of revenge. They thought they had stolen everything from me. But what if Grandpa had played them all? The thought made me smile through my exhaustion. Tomorrow, I would dig, and I would find the truth. The morning air was cool as I drove. Back to Grandpa's house, my heart pounding with both dread and determination. Even though the family had sold it, the new owners hadn't moved in yet, which gave me a narrow window. I slipped inside through the back door, the key still heavy on my keychain, as if Grandpa had placed it there for this very moment. The house was quiet, filled with dust motes dancing in the slanting light. I moved slowly, checking the places. Where Grandpa used to keep his treasures, drawers, bookshelves, the attic filled with boxes of old tools and photographs. Hours passed with nothing but frustration. Each box I opened seemed more ordinary than the last, but then I found it. An old leather trunk tucked in the far corner of the attic, its lock rusty, its surface etched with initials. G.M. George Mason, my grandfather. With trembling hands, I pried it open. Inside, stacks of papers, journals, and envelopes greeted me. My breath caught. These weren't just memories. They were secrets waiting to be uncovered. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice urging me forward. Somewhere in here, I was certain, lay the truth. Buried beneath old photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings was a small envelope with my name written in Grandpa's careful handwriting. Elena. My throat tightened as I tore it open. His words spilled out in neat cursive. If you're reading this, they've done exactly what I feared. But don't despair, I prepared for this. The house was only one part of what I wanted you to have. If they take it, remember, look beneath, the roots. What matters most is buried deeper than they can ever reach. My hands shook. Beneath the roots. He had written it plainly, not as a metaphor, but as instructions. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. Grandpa hadn't abandoned me, not even in death. He had left me a trail, a puzzle, a lifeline, and suddenly the oak tree in the backyard wasn't just a tree, it was a vault. I rushed outside, letter clutched in my hand. The oak tree towered. Above me, its branches stretched wide like an ancient guardian. Beneath its shadow, I remembered every moment I'd spent there with Grandpa, reading books, sharing secrets, even burying small-time capsules for fun. Now I wondered if those games had been practice for this moment. His words repeated in my head, "Look beneath the roots." Dropping to my knees, I brushed away the fallen leaves and dirt, my fingers trembling. Could he really have hidden something here? It seemed impossible. Yet knowing Grandpa, it was exactly the kind of clever, protective act he would have taken. The ground was firm but not impenetrable. I dug with my hands until my nails broke, then grabbed an old spade from the shed. Each shovel of dirt sent my heart racing. Something was waiting down there. I could feel it in my bones. And then, with a metallic clang, the spade struck something solid. The sound echoed through the still yard. My pulse hammered as I dropped to the dirt and clawed away the soil until the edges of a small rusted metal box came into view. It was heavy, its lock corroded with age. I dragged it out from the earth, dirt caking my hands, my heart screaming with hope and fear. Was this really it? Grandpa's final secret? The lock was brittle. With a few strikes of the spade, it snapped open. Inside, wrapped carefully in waxed cloth, were documents, deeds, papers, envelopes, and a leather-bound notebook. The first page of the notebook contained one line in Grandpa's handwriting. "If they betrayed you, remember this. You are still the true heir." Tears blurred my vision as I realized what I was holding. This wasn't just a memory box. It was a weapon. I sat beneath the oak tree, pulling out each document with care. There were property deeds not just for the house, but for farmland and rental properties I hadn't known existed. My breath caught as I unfolded a notarized will, signed later than the one read by the lawyer. This will was different. It stated clearly that all of Grandpa's assets, without exception, were to be placed in a private trust controlled solely by me. Shock and disbelief coursed through me. This wasn't just about the house. Grandpa had left me everything, and suddenly the betrayal of my family shifted in my mind. They hadn't just stolen a house. They had tried to erase me from a legacy far greater than they ever knew. The most startling discovery came last: bank documents tied to the trust. Grandpa had quietly transferred money into a separate account over the years: investments, savings, and returns. The total balance nearly made me drop the papers. Over $800,000 sat in that account, untouched, waiting for me. My hands trembled as I laughed through my tears. Grandpa hadn't just protected me, he had outsmarted them all. Every cruel word, every mocking smile from my cousins, every cold dismissal from my parents, it all crumbled in the face of this truth. They thought they had taken everything, but in reality, they had barely scratched the surface. Grandpa had played the long game, and I had just inherited the winning hand. I sat there for hours, staring at the pile of documents in awe. My grief had turned to fury, then to vindication. All along, Grandpa had trusted me to find this. All along, he had known I was strong enough. But the shock wasn't just in the inheritance. It was in the power. The house sale? Void without my consent. The assets? Legally mine. The trust? Ironclad. I imagined my cousins' smug faces melting when they realized the truth. I pictured my parents' cold justification crumbling under the weight of the law. For the first time since his death, I smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because justice was finally possible. They thought they'd erased me. But Grandpa's backup plan had just resurrected me stronger than ever, and soon my family would discover the cost of underestimating me. The next morning, I met with Grandpa's lawyer, a stern woman named Ms. Calder. I laid the documents on her desk, watching her eyes widen as she examined the trust papers, the deeds, and the backup will. "Ms. Elena," she said slowly, "this is airtight. Your grandfather truly anticipated their betrayal. Legally, everything here is yours. They cannot touch a single asset without your consent." My heart raced. After weeks of helplessness, I finally felt the first taste of power. My family had acted under the assumption that the house sale ended everything. They had no idea Grandpa had prepared for this moment. I could almost hear his voice again. "They may take what they can, Elena, but they cannot take your spirit or your legacy." I left her office with a sense of calm determination. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. When I first confronted my parents with the truth, they laughed. "It's just paperwork," my father scoffed. "They're legalities. They don't change anything." Evelyn and Marcus joined in, sneering and attempting to intimidate me. "See? You're imagining things, Elena. The money's gone. The house is sold. What's left?" I smiled faintly, a quiet, dangerous smile. "You've already seen the documents. You've already read the backup will. Legally, the assets are mine. Everything you sold is null without my consent." Their confident smirks faltered. I could see the realization dawning. They had miscalculated. They had assumed I was powerless. They had assumed I would cry, beg, and vanish. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Ms. Calder had explained it clearly. The house sale was technically void, since it had been sold without my consent, and the assets were held in a trust. The new owners had no legal claim. The feeling of triumph surged through me. Every greedy move my family had made suddenly became a liability. Every mocking word they had said, every sneer and accusation, they would now face consequences. I envisioned the court notices, the lawyers, the subpoenas. I didn't have to yell or threaten. The law was on my side, and Grandpa had ensured I had every weapon necessary. Evelyn's phone calls came first, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "Elena, this isn't funny. You can't do this. We didn't know—" "Don't call me Evelyn," I said calmly. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you sold my inheritance. The documents make everything clear. You have to repay every cent or face legal action." Marcus was next, trying the old intimidation tactics, but they fell flat. I didn't flinch, didn't plead. The tables had turned. I could almost picture their smug expressions from the reading of the will twisting into panic. They had underestimated me, underestimated Grandpa, underestimated the power of preparation. My parents eventually came to me in person, desperate and broken. "Elena, please," my mother begged. "You don't have to ruin the family. It's not worth it." My father's hands trembled as he spoke. "We only wanted to protect you and the family. Please consider what you're doing." I looked at them, my eyes cold but steady. "Protect me? You sold my inheritance without asking. You erased my legacy. This isn't protection, it's theft. You had a choice, and you chose greed." Their pleas meant nothing. Grandpa had trusted me to act, and I would act. Their desperation was proof that I was finally in control. I spent the night reviewing the trust and preparing my strategy. No emotion would sway me. Grandpa had planned every step, and now it was my turn to execute the plan flawlessly. The house, the trust, the money, it was all mine. Every claim my family tried to make would be refuted by the meticulous documents Grandpa had left behind. I felt a thrill in my chest. They had thought betrayal would weaken me, but it had only sharpened my resolve. I was no longer the powerless girl who cried over stolen memories. I was a force, a guardian of Grandpa's legacy, ready to reclaim everything with precision. With every document reviewed, every lawyer consulted, I prepared for the inevitable showdown. My family had no idea what was coming. I counted down the days, ensuring every legal step was set, every backup in place. When the day came, they would be blindsided, not by anger but by the truth, undeniable and absolute. Grandpa had given me the tools. Now it was time to wield them. Their betrayal would be their undoing, and justice would finally be served. The day finally arrived. I gathered my parents, Evelyn, and Marcus in the old living room, the same room where Grandpa's will had been. Read. The air was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves remembered the betrayal. I laid the documents on the table, each one a symbol of Grandpa's foresight. "Everything you took," I said calmly, "everything you thought was yours, is legally mine. Grandpa anticipated your greed, and he left me proof." Evelyn scoffed, but the sneer faltered. Marcus's hands shook as he reached for a glass of water, but I ignored them. My voice remained steady, precise, and cold. "You sold my inheritance without asking. Now, you must face the consequences." The room was silent, heavy with realization. For the first time, they understood that they weren't facing a tantrum. They were facing justice, and there was no escaping it. Evelyn's anger exploded first. "You can't do this! This is our family! We decide what happens!" I leaned forward, my expression unreadable. "No, Evelyn. Grandpa decided, and his decision is binding. You underestimated me, you underestimated him, and now you will see the price of that mistake." Marcus tried intimidation, trying to argue, but every word faltered under the weight of legal authority. Their fury only highlighted their vulnerability. I was calm, controlled, untouchable. Grandpa's plan had given me this advantage, and I would wield it with precision. The lawyer's office was crowded with tension as we entered the courthouse. I held my head high, documents clutched tightly. Grandpa's will and the trust papers were irrefutable. The judge listened intently as I laid out every fact, every betrayal, and every legal violation. Evelyn and Marcus tried to interject, but the judge silenced them. "The law is clear," he said. "Without Elena's consent, the sale of the property is void. The assets revert to her control immediately." A wave of triumph washed over me. They had thought they could erase me. They had thought greed would protect them. But law and Grandpa's careful planning were stronger than any betrayal. Back at the house, I walked through the rooms, each one a memory, each one a testament to Grandpa's love. The house was mine, truly mine. The trust fund, the properties, the money, everything that had been hidden and protected for me was finally in my hands. The house smelled of wood, dust, and nostalgia. Every corner whispered Grandpa's presence. I ran my hands along the banister, tears welling. He had protected me even in death, and now I had the power to protect my own legacy. The financial fallout for my cousins and parents was devastating. Because they had sold assets without my consent, the law required full restitution. They had to repay every cent plus penalties, received calls from their lawyers begging for delays, compromises, anything to avoid full repayment. I remained firm. Grandpa's vision had prepared me for this. They had underestimated the consequences of betrayal, and now they were paying the price. Evelyn cornered me one evening, her eyes flashing with venom. "You may have the money and the house, but you'll never truly belong to this family." I stepped closer, calm and unshaken. "You belong to greed, Evelyn. You've shown who you are. I belong to Grandpa's legacy, and that's something you can never take." Her face twisted with rage, but her words had no power. I had taken control, and she knew it. I turned away from her, walking toward the sunlight streaming through the windows. "You thought betrayal would weaken me," I said softly, but with unmistakable authority. "It only made me stronger. You tried to erase me, but I claimed what was always mine." The realization hit her fully. I wasn't angry. I wasn't pleading. I was untouchable. Days later, I returned to the house alone. The rooms were quiet, filled with memories of Grandpa and the smell of old wood. I felt peace for the first time since the betrayal. I walked through the garden, brushing my hands along the oak tree's trunk. This was more than a house. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of resilience, and a reminder of the love that had guided me through the darkest times. Standing at the doorway, I whispered to the empty house, "You tried to erase me, but I reclaimed it all. Grandpa's legacy lives on through me." The sunlight warmed my face as I stepped outside, carrying the weight of justice and the freedom of victory. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. I had survived betrayal, outsmarted greed, and honored the one person who had always believed in me. The world was mine now.